Yep.
Yeah, okay.
It's been a minute.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order. And we have everybody present except Mandy, who's not here tonight, and Kristen, who's not here tonight. So we have Bob, Susanna, Megan, Vali.
And Medi Smith, the Sustainability Coordinator for the town.
So the way we're going to run the meeting today is a little different than what we normally do. We're going to have people step up to the podium so you can get your voice recorded on Zoom. The meeting is being recorded. It won't be live broadcast, and it won't be in the cable channel, but it will be on Zoom. Correct, Medi? Okay.
Correct, yep.
So the link to view this meeting later on will be at our website?
Yeah, I think I can post the recording for
Okay.
people to watch.
Okay, perfect.
Be able to.
So basically, we're just going to approve the minutes, and then we're going to invite people up to the podium to give us feedback on the plan. I believe people have had a chance to look at a draft. But if not, Medi, you're going to give a little bit of an intro to explain what the plan is all about? Okay, perfect. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, Medi, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can just explain to everyone the process briefly that we've been through, and then what is included in the plan up to date.
Yeah, sure.
The plan is fluid. It's still being adjusted based on all the feedback that we get from you and other people who are showing up at workshops and other ways that we're collecting feedback.
Yeah, so thank you all for coming. We don't normally sit up here, but the audio quality is very good for folks tuning in online, kind of have that hybrid component. So usually we sit right down front. It's pretty casual. But thank you all for showing up tonight. So I just wanted to kind of preface the feedback we'll be getting with a couple of slides on the climate action plan process. So let's see. Sorry. There we go. So the slides are up on the screen on your right. So the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board has been working to develop a climate action plan for over a year now, and it started with winning a state grant to initiate the climate action plan process and hire a part-time sustainability coordinator, which is me, and I'm lucky to have that position and get to know you all and help develop this plan and kind of go along with this process. And then the Greater Portland Council of Governments, who we're contracting with, has been conducting data analysis, mostly in two forms. So a greenhouse gas inventory report, understanding where the emissions are coming from in Freeport and how we're contributing to climate change, a vulnerability assessment that looks at where people and places and infrastructure in town are vulnerable, and they also did a supplemental transportation analysis for this project that we requested. And now we're in the kind of final stages of developing the plan and crafting the recommendations for actions, which we are going to be talking about tonight. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that there's been, we've been striving to have engagement opportunities throughout this process, online and in person, through events and conversations. So this kind of fits neatly into all the opportunities we've provided for people to share input and help shape this plan together. And we've developed this plan, I think, to have realistic actions and a flexible framework. So the actions are meant to roll up to achieve the emission reduction targets that the town council adopted last fall. But they're situated in a framework that is a living document that is guided by kind of some values for implementation, and that's meant to be flexible to the evolving conditions of, federal and state funding and changing technologies and community priorities. So we're kind of excited that this plan is a foundation for the town to move forward with and continue adapting over time. So the actions that we're going to be talking about tonight, and that hopefully you've got a chance to look at in the plan, were developed through kind of four channels all coming together. So, using best practices, what the Greater Portland Council of Government kind of recommended that towns our neighboring towns, what they're looking to accomplish and planning to accomplish, as well as regional and state plans. And then, of course, the just best practices throughout the country and the world for addressing climate change and reducing emissions. And then public input and staff and stakeholder feedback throughout the process has also kind of helped tailor some of these actions to Freeport. So we're hoping to get more feedback tonight to refine actions. And then, of course, the Sustainability Advisory Board really leading the way to make sure the actions are right for Freeport and what they want to be included in the plan as it gets recommended to council. And so before we dive into talking about actions, I think it's kind of good to kind of frame that conversation around what implementation could look like. And so some of the values and kind of the elements of success that we're thinking that if we roll out this plan and we're going to implement it, we need to collaborate both internally across town departments and town committees, and also externally with regional organizations and neighboring towns. Also establishing roles and resources for project management will be important, like any other project or plan. To really get it done, we need to have a clear process in place. Tracking progress will be key. As we go through the actions tonight, we'll want to understand, how will we know if we're on the right track to reduce our emissions and support our community being resilient. We have some key metrics proposed and some milestones. So being transparent about our progress over time and understanding where we need to make changes and adjust will be really important as well for success. And then, of course, maximizing external funding sources, centering equity through implementation, and building community capacity with education and resources so that folks have the resources they need to take action. So that's at least a little bit, and this is kind of outlined in the final chapter of the draft plan, but how we could see implementation going smoothly. So the document that I have printed out, if you've grabbed a copy, that's the implementation table. So that is an appendix to the plan that has a little bit more information and details and organization than what's included in the draft plan itself. And it outlines goals, which are more visionary, strategies under those goals, which are more broad approaches for implementing or achieving goals, and then actions, which are specific mechanisms for achieving a given strategy. And then we have some bullet points on the far right of that table, which are implementation considerations. So we've heard a lot of great ideas and notes throughout the process of really how could we get this done? What are some of the first steps? Who are the key players? What do we want to keep in mind? And we didn't want to lose any of that great information, so we just started a column where we can just note that information. And so with some of the conversations we've been having, a lot of that information is listed in that column. So I think tonight we'd love to know your thoughts on, do you agree in general with the intent of the actions, what the actions is looking to accomplish? Do you have any notes that could fit in this implementation column? How you think the town could implement this action? What's key to success? How can we center equity? Who can we bring in as partners? Do you think there's anything major missing, or really any other thoughts, ideas, or comments as we go through? So that's some of the guiding questions I had put together and thought of that might help our conversation. But other than that, I was thinking of just going through, starting from that first page and opening it up for comments at the podium on the actions. So unless Valley or anyone else on the board wants to add anything, I think we could dive in.
You're good.
All right. So the first focus area is connected mobility and land use. And I realize that's a little bit small on the screen, but that's just an overview of what is on the table itself. So if anyone has comments, ideas, or thoughts on this focus area and the actions we've put together in the draft, please step up to the podium and share. We're not being streamed, so it's more casual than it feels, I think. Right, we're being streamed to Zoom, but not, Caroline says we are on cable, great. Okay. All right, well, great. Then it's very formal, so just kidding. So yeah, some of the actions we have in this focus area, we're really thinking about electric vehicles. We're thinking about walking, biking, and infrastructure to support that.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so Allison Burson, I'm a Freeport resident and also National Greenway Director for East Coast Greenway Alliance. Really excited to see the town working on this plan, and thank you. My first question under Goal 2 is if there's a way to include maintenance as part of the plan, because it's super important, especially in winter, to have considered snow removal and funding for it as part of that implementation plan, especially as the town's thinking about building out a larger sidewalk and shared use path network. So that's my first sort of very detailed observation and question. And then the second piece, could you tell me what is the percentage of Freeport's greenhouse gas emissions that come from transportation? And how does it compare to the state average? Because I think my understanding is Freeport's quite different from sort of the state or national average and much higher.
I don't have an answer, but unfortunately, I forgot to bring my hearing aids tonight.
Sorry.
Love you if you'd speak up, Sam.
Yeah, I was wondering, do any of you know what Freeport's percent of emissions are from transportation and how that? 58.
Says in the plan.
Yeah, and do you know how that compare? I think the national average tends to be closer to 30 by communities, and I was wondering what has been, a range, but Freeport's really high, and was wondering what in particular this plan does to address sort of that being quite different from other communities.
Do you want to respond? Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll turn it on to Mary because she has all the numbers in her head and I don't. But I wanted to say that Freeport is higher than the national average. Maine as a state is much higher also because we're a very rural state. So if you look at Maine One Weight, which is the state plan, you will see that compared to the national average, transportation is a higher percentage of greenhouse gas emissions. But comparing Freeport to the state plan, Mary, can you give some feedback?
Yeah, so I believe that Freeport is higher than the state average. The methodologies are a bit different, but I think that Freeport compared to neighboring communities is also a bit higher in the transportation sector. So we did another analysis with GPCOG to kind of drill down into some of this information, understand a little bit more about who's coming in and out, what the vehicle makeup is. So we have a little bit more data, which is in an appendix. But, we have an emphasis on kind of understanding that and focusing on alternative transportation modes to address that. So this is our first focus area, and it actually has more actions than the rest of them because this is one of the highest impact kind of focus areas we can think about. So we have a focus on EVs, but we also have a strong focus, this goal too, on active mobility. And I think that we understand, and the folks from Freeport can maybe speak to this more, but that we have the commercial side of Freeport and the busy downtown and the businesses located here that both draw in visitors and shoppers and folks going to restaurants and also kind of commercial-oriented traffic. So that all rolls into that. And so that, is part of why we have higher transportation emissions than Yarmouth or Cumberland, for example. But we're hoping to have, a really strong focus on that since it's our biggest bucket of emissions.
I'd like to add something to that, too. I think it's a great question. We are different, and we do have a high percentage here of it. It's transportation, 58%. And we are a different kind of community, as Mehdi noticed, because we depend upon shoppers here. We have a lot of people coming in for that. There are, of course, a lot of employees coming in for that. We tried to address that in some of the action, not specific actions, but that we need to work with businesses to somehow have them have incentives for employees and perhaps giving other opportunities for people to carpool here. And it's going to take a lot of work with the town, with the businesses. And we haven't really, that's going to come, hopefully, as the implementation of the plan takes place.
Any other comments or questions on this section?
Hi, Laura Hench, Freeport resident. Just a quick question about the adopted municipal vehicle procurement plan. Does that include school buses?
So it does not.
Okay.
Yeah, the RSU
Is
is kind of
separate.
outside of the scope of this
Yeah.
plan, but I think it would be in our best interest to partner with the school in any way that's feasible and support them to transition to electric school buses. But that would be not in the scope of this
Yeah.
document. Yeah.
And then another quick question overall, when it says the time frame, short, medium, what does that mean? Years? Is there like a deadline? Is there a goal for 2030 or what's?
Yeah, sure. So the short time frame, it's in pretty small font. I was trying to save space. The short time frame
yes,
is 2024 to 2026, and then kind of going up from there. And you'll see that most of the actions are short and medium because our kind of planning horizon is about a decade. At that time, we'd surely have accomplished a lot of this, hopefully, and have different things to work on.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Next one?
Yeah, okay. Oh, one more.
Never mind.
Randy Roy, question is, out of the 58% greenhouse gas emissions, how much of that comes from tourism versus the local populace?
There's really no way to determine that. What there are, as Mehdi indicated, we got some figures from GPCOG comparing the months which are seemingly high in summer activity, people coming here to shop and to visit, of being higher than months, the down months, so to speak, of January and February. But there's no way to measure and to, in fact, what those particular vehicles are and what they came here for.
You do have a streetlights survey, though, that details that, right? Details the amount of traffic coming into town? The streetlight survey?
Yeah, the streetlight.
So could you
transportation
calculate
hours.
what the percentage from tourism would be versus the percent of greenhouse gas emissions from?
So we can't make the connection. We only know vehicle class, so, light duty, passenger type cars
Right.
and medium and heavy duty. So we don't know exactly the breakdown. We can't say that car is someone coming from away.
Right, but you know how many vehicles are in Freeport, both commercial and residential, I would assume. So by deduction, you could probably figure that out. Just a suggestion.
We do know that approximately 50% of workers in Freeport and residents in Freeport, so both people who work in the town and live out of town and people who live in town and work out of town, travel between 10 and 24 miles per commute, so each way. We know that of the 58%, 40% of the total emissions come from passenger vehicles, 16% come from commercial trucks, et cetera, 1% from buses. And so we do have additional breakdowns for that, but we don't have specifically what car actually originated in town versus came through.
Okay, thank you.
And we also, just for the question on Laura's question on school buses, the RSU is slightly different in that we're working with Freeport for this, and the RSU is obviously a tri-town community. But also just remembering that all municipal emissions total 1% of our total. So, that's another reason that, while municipal emissions get a lot of attention, tackling that is not where the bigger picture is at the moment. So still important, but that's a little bit removed as well.
Susanna, thank you. I'm just going to allow someone to talk on Zoom. Sorry, I wasn't checking earlier, new to this. So I think that will work. Mason, if you'd like to speak your comment now. You're on.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear
Yep.
me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, first of all, for organizing a much better presentation or means of communication tonight by sitting up with the speakers and so forth. Makes it a lot easier for those of us from away. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Freeport Climate Action Now, and we would first like to congratulate Mitty Smith and the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board on an exceptionally impressive draft climate action plan. We also congratulate the town council for having previously set the very ambitious goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions that drive the actions proposed by the draft plan. Ambitious. These goals are the minimum necessary as determined by virtually the entire scientific community. The draft plan clearly reflects a huge amount of data gathering and analysis, citizen input and thought. It's almost comprehensive, has clear priorities, is action-oriented, and sets metrics for measuring progress. However, it does not include metrics, for example, for significant but difficult to measure GHG emissions associated with meat-based diets, one-and-done clothing, and gas-powered lawn tools, all of which we can and should do something about. The plan says there's an opportunity to realize the full value of our resources and stimulate innovation and circularity in our local economy by reducing our consumption, buying still functional used items, reusing goals and materials as many times as possible, and diverting waste to recycling and composting. Apart from recommendations pertaining to recycling and composting, there are virtually no associated action items or metrics. If these actions are considered beyond the scope of this plan because they rely primarily on individual rather than town action, we hope the plan will include language like this. We recognize and support the work of local climate action organizations like Freeport Climate Action Now, which directly addresses these issues. We also urge citizens of Freeport to inform themselves of the role these emissions play in the warming of the planet and urge them to take actions to reduce their individual carbon footprints. That said, the plan does emphasize that it's a living document to be reviewed and revised at annual 3 intervals as appropriate. Finally, we would like to emphatically agree with the top priorities set in the draft plan. 1, reducing the greenhouse gases produced from vehicular transportation. And 2, reducing the GHGs produced from fossil fuel home heating. As has been pointed out elsewhere, you can't empty an overflowing bathtub with a bucket unless you turn off the water. It's not clear that the town has the mechanisms to prevent some climate-driven effects. For example, protecting coastal waters against sea level rise and increasing acidification. What the town does have are the mechanisms to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the areas of transportation, 56% of the town total, and buildings, 38% of the total. i.e., we can help put more electric cars and trucks on the road. We can build more pedestrian and bicycle-friendly roads, all more heat pumps, and electric hot water heaters. We know what to do and how to do it. Let's do it. As the draft climate action plan says, the time to act is now. Thank you. Freeport Climate Action Now looks forward to working with the town on this critical project.
Thank you, Mason.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments on connected mobility before we jump on to the next focus area? I think Mason was the only one on Zoom, so should be good there. So we'll move on and we can always come back. Oh yeah, go ahead.
And also, I just wanted to tell Mason before moving on that we're taking notes, Mason, so everything that is being said at this meeting, we're basically tallying everything, and then it will be incorporated into the plan. So this is a exercise for hearing comments from the public. we won't necessarily report back and say, yeah, we're going to include that, we're not going to include that, this is higher, this is lower in our priorities. But we will eventually tally everything that we're hearing from everybody and the things that are bubbling up and the things that address the most prominent need. For example, transportation, which is one of the largest areas where we emit greenhouse gases, will be front and center in the plan. Thank you. So now-
Thank you.
Great. So the next focus area, next big one, is relating to buildings and the energy we use in buildings. So opening it up for any comments on the draft actions here, any thoughts?
Manny, do you want to explain a little bit, like CPACE? There's some things that people may not be familiar with.
Yeah, sure. So we have some newer ideas on the online version. They're hyperlinked out to websites where you can learn more. But the CPACE refers to a commercial PACE ordinance. So Efficiency Maine has a funding mechanism for businesses that would allow them to access really great low-interest loans and financing for clean energy and building upgrades. So if they wanted to electrify the building their business is in with heat pumps or heat pump systems or put on solar, they can access great financing. So this action is really to adopt a CPACE ordinance. And that's required in order for businesses in Freeport to use that mechanism through Efficiency Maine. And I can explain if there are any other terms you think are unclear here. Maybe energy benchmarking program is a little bit of a new one. So the action, we're recommending piloting this kind of program. So this is getting at working with businesses to use a free federal tool to track and report and disclose energy use throughout the year, so they have an understanding of where they fit along comparable buildings, and kind of supports them in making choices to upgrade their buildings to save energy and save operating costs. So it's kind of a benchmarking and a baselining program for businesses with a free Energy Star federal tool. So the idea is that we would pilot this with a couple of businesses, focusing on larger commercial businesses that would use more energy and maybe save more energy, and just see how it goes and see if it's worth expanding to other commercial sizes. Yeah, come on up.
Hey, Eric Sofin, Freeport resident. So first question regarding the energy benchmarking. I think you mentioned the data from that. Is that public? Is the idea that that's publicly available? On the town website, that sort of thing, or is it just for the businesses?
Yeah, so the idea of the benchmarking programs that I've seen is that it's more of an internal tool for the businesses to use. But I think that, in our conversations we've had about this, it's interesting to think about the idea of kind of transparency and motivating other businesses, or transparency with clients and consumers to understand, the energy efficiency and kind of the sustainable brand of the businesses that they go to or work at. So I think we'd have to explore more to see what businesses are comfortable with or what is kind of most efficient and effective in that action.
I'd encourage you to, go that direction toward the public data.
Yeah.
And then regarding the municipal power purchase agreement, 4.1.2, I see that that's listed as medium term, and I'm surprised that that's not a short-term fix. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, the reason is that Freeport already has a PPA, so
That
we
has a
do cover about 75% of the consumption with credits. So this would be an exploration of maybe considering increasing the amount of credits that we purchase so that we can cover more of the electrical consumption of the municipality.
Okay. And then last question is about electric system resiliency. when we lose power, lots of people have generators, which aren't particularly clean. And we're sort of at the whims of CMP. Could you elaborate a bit more on what the town can do regarding grid resiliency?
Yeah, sure. So I think that this goal 4 is kind of attempting to lay the foundation of that problem, which I think a lot of towns in Maine, a lot of Mainers really feel is important in the coming decade. So how can we make sure that when we lose power, our grid is, well, first of all, it's more resilient. We don't lose power as much, but, a lot of that maybe is out of the town's direct control. But, where we see intervention at a town scale is thinking about encouraging microgrids. So where there's solar or renewable energy produced and stored kind of on a small grid scale. And so those kind of geomicrogrids can be offline or kind of island mode, so they're independent of the larger grid, just like a generator is, but if you think about that in a larger scale. So, that's something they do on military bases and college campuses and things, but I think communities are really thinking about how they can encourage, businesses or kind of campuses or neighborhoods to take advantage of that kind of technology to be a little bit more independent from, any problems with the regional grid and more resilient, able to bounce back as, weather gets weirder. So that's definitely part of it. And then just kind of being prepared also for emergencies where there's no power for, multiple days, and making sure that we have backup power at critical facilities for people to be able to go to a shelter and access resources that they need. But I think there's a long way to go and a lot of great ideas out there, so we'll stay in the loop. Thank you.
I'm Naomi Beal, Freeport resident and executive director of Passive House Maine, and I'm so excited to have this in hand. I just do give props to FSAB, FCAN, Freeport as a town, and I'm speaking to the buildings section. Mostly this looks awesome. I do have a question about where we landed on the stretch code in perpetuity. Is that something that we need to revisit, and should that be on the list, or are we set with that? So that's just a question.
So the town adopted the most recent 2021 stretch code, but thinking about how we move forward with future stretch codes, or?
It wasn't clear to me, and maybe, I don't know if it's politic to bring it up at this point, but I guess I just wanted to make sure it's on the radar as an option for the municipality to adopt the next iteration, which I think will be generated by the summertime, sometime pretty soon, I think. And then in that same spirit is another concept that's a municipality thing, and I know this is a living document, so things will be added on, but there is the possibility for towns to adopt a home energy score system for points of sale, and then we sort of get a data dump about how our buildings are looking, and also perhaps inspiring people to do upgrades, knowing that their buildings will be scored. So I have those two concepts, and then overarchingly, of course, I'm always looking at the retrofits, and I know you're mentioning them here in terms of municipal buildings. I'm sure that will be where we have most control, but I don't think we could overemphasize that 3.1.1 and how big that challenge is going to be, and how community-oriented it's going to need to be in order to get everybody on board. So just giving a shout out to that specifically. And then overarchingly, I'm just hoping that, and I'm assuming, especially since we have many on board, that we're able to coordinate with all of the funding streams that exist out there through the state, through the counties, through federal programs, to take advantage as best we can for all opportunities. There are, like, every once in a while, I see these programs, pop up on my stream, my feed, my emails that are like, what's your cool energy program that your town wants to do? I think I forwarded that one. And I just don't know what happens to those. I don't know. I'm just wondering. You can answer how. I'm sure you're excellent about organizing those, hearing them, and putting them into the plan. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Naomi. So in the plan, we have listed a couple of example funding sources just to kind of give a nod to the once in a generation amount of federal funding that's out there for this kind of sustainability and resilience work. But I think the next steps in the project management of this plan would really be creating a more detailed kind of timeline and connecting the actions that we'll do immediately with funding and mapping on funding for actions we'll do 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, and really trying to get an understanding of where those sources are that we can leverage for each of the actions that are very important and necessary for us to do to meet our goals. So I think the kind of specific mapping of funding will come later in our project management of implementation. But certainly just getting ideas and kind of sharing information about where the funding is, because there are so many opportunities. It is hard for one board or one person to kind of navigate it all. And so I think, as a community, if we can just, try to stay on top of it and share those resources, we should be in a better place. But I think it does take an enormous amount of work and administration to be able to apply for and manage those grants. So,
I mean, to that point, do you feel like we're well positioned for that, or do you wish we had another full-time person?
well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Caroline could speak to that.
Are we staffed enough to take advantage of all that's available?
So we probably shouldn't discuss that topic tonight, but we are aware that it requires an immense amount of work to implement a plan like this, and we are in conversations with staff at the town level just to ensure that when the time comes, we're well positioned to be able to, like you say, take advantage of all the funding. But what Mary said about the community helping us identify sources, that's always super helpful. So Mary, you want to tell everyone your email address so that if people come across good opportunities, they can just send them your way, even though I'm sure you have a rack of different sources already.
Yeah, sure. So my email is always open, msmith@freeportmaine.com. And I mean, right now I just have a running Excel sheet where I'm organizing all the funding sources I am hearing about and just capturing them there for now. If they're not mapped onto the specific actions in the plan, they do live online where the board has access and town staff has access. And I'm just kind of forwarding things along to other staff. But, I think, as Valerie mentioned, and Naomi, you got to, I think that, significant staff resources are needed to kind of really pursue some of those larger funds and true coordination and collaboration. So we look forward to figuring that out.
I also want to add that one of the specific things we asked from GPCOG when we hired them to do the plan for us was to tally up all the available sources of funding that they know of, and they are very much in tune with everything that's going on. So I think just through our relationship with them, we're pretty well set to take advantage of at least the most salient opportunities. But by all means, anything that you guys come across, send them our way. It may be that it's already on Maddie's list, but it may not be. So thank you.
I'm Jim Hughes. I live in Fire Cove and Freeport. On goal 3, the buildings, it seems to be redundant with the state building code. Am I reading that right?
The goal itself is kind of visionary, but the actions under it you're saying are the actions such as
The state has building efficiency codes, which basically take care of this whole area, I believe.
So in this area, we're looking to go a bit above the state building code and look at, even the stretch code that Freeport adopted in the fall doesn't get at producing renewable energy on site, so having like solar on a building, if that's feasible, thinking about how we can maximize any new construction to meet our goals. So that would be kind of facilitating clean energy produced at the building. That would be electrification, could be, having it be EV ready or solar ready. So we are thinking that the high impact action under goal 3 would be trying to see how we can go above the state's building codes.
Okay, I don't see anywhere where we're exceeding the code.
That would be in strategy 3.2, that action there about phasing in requirements.
In other words, giving incentives for renewed energy.
Let me pull it up. Sorry, I'm just reading.
Which is done
up.
by Efficiency Maine. I see this whole thing as being redundant with other parts of the government are already working on this. And of course, the free enterprise system is working on it. The most of the buildings are trying to get as efficient as they can because it saves them money.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, that is very true. And do you have any suggestions to go beyond what the stretch code is requiring of everyone in the state of Maine?
I've sold energy management systems for over 50 years. And basically, any building I go into, I can cut the power by at least 25%. I've saved as much as 60% in some buildings. Just routine stuff, but that we were doing that for $1. We were doing that for free enterprise.
That's excellent, thank you. And if you do have any specifics that you would like us to consider, then feel free, not right now, if you don't, if you would rather.
Buy
contact
Honeywell
us.
energy management systems.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this focus area before we move on? The next one is circular economy, smart waste management. Going once. Okay, I think we'll move on. So the third focus area in the plan, which Mason kind of got to and I think read some of in his earlier comment, thinking about using resources efficiently, thinking about recycling and composting, but also trying to set a foundation for a more circular economy and a more resource sharing economy. No comments on that one, all good? Looks perfect.
This is another that the sort of accounting is really hard to do, but knowing that Freeport sort of has multiple contractors doing waste pickup and recycling pickup, as well as individual households doing the trips, is there any way that could be added into one of these that's sort of looking at transportation and the transportation footprint of the trash and recycling travel as sort of a component of this that might not be insignificant given the number of single vehicle trips to the dump currently?
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Hi. This is regarding the developing a library of things, which, Freeport Climate Action Now has been working with the library to establish that, and it's been quite difficult. So I see it as a short-term goal or strategy. I just wondered if you had any other ideas about how that would be implemented, because I feel like that idea has kind of run its course and with no clear idea of how to expand it beyond what has been done, given the limited space of the library.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've been a part of some of those conversations and you know, I understand the constraints there. But I think that for the goals and the kind of the vision of this focus area, it's definitely still a very important action to try to achieve. So
Yeah.
even if it takes 3 more years, like
Sure.
I think that it's a key part in this focus area, even if we can't, you know, tally up all the emissions reductions as far as fostering a, you know, a culture of resource sharing and getting people thinking about it. I think it is really important, and we'd probably just, through implementation, just try to figure out a way
Sure.
to make it work within
Yeah.
municipal capacity.
Another avenue in this regard is we've really been trying to establish a way for there be a loan program for electric lawn equipment. And that has been a real sticking point because we just haven't figured out a way to house the equipment, loan it out efficiently, have a system in place to check it as it comes back in, make sure it's in good working order. So it's a good piece, but that's a tricky thing. They're all tricky, but
Yeah,
thanks.
definitely. Thank you. Any more comments on waste and a circular economy? Otherwise, the next one is lands and waters. Might be excited about that one. We'll move on and we can always come back. So the fourth out of 5 is healthy natural lands and waters. And in this focus area, we're thinking about, you know, the first goal 6 is about stewardship practices. And then goal 7 is thinking about protection and conservation. And so an interesting part of this under strategy 7.1 is the state has a goal to conserve 30% of land by 2030. So I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on Freeport's, you know, if Freeport can accomplish that. You know, Carrie sent over some data that maybe she wants to share about where we are now related to that goal, but open it up for comments if anyone has thoughts on this focus area.
You want to explain?
Carrie Kinney, Freeport Conservation Trust. So I think knowing where Freeport stands at the 30% is really important. And after quite a few emails, I at least have an idea where Freeport now stands to the 30%. Caroline and I were comparing notes just before this meeting. It's still up for some discussion. But FCT has conserved 1,849 acres. I created kind of an other category, which is Wolf's Neck State Park, Wolf's Neck Center, Mass Landing, Pettingill Farm. That's 1,155 acres, plus or minus, and then the town lands, which would be Hidden Pond and Quarry Woods have easements on them, so that's under the FCT numbers, but Hedgehog, Florida Lake, Winslow Park, and I have to get some of the smaller ones, right now is at 488. So total land conserved in those 3 categories is right now 3492. I think it's going to go up probably 70 acres or so. So that would be 15.7, and I think we'll end up right at 16 probably when I get all of the numbers in. So I would say Freeport is pretty close to 16% right now, as of. Now, how you describe what conserved land is a whole nother, you know, if they can sell it, then is it really conserved, you know. But anyway, that's what it looks like, just roughly. And so I don't know if you're looking for nits or that can be editing type things that can be done later, but it would be great for Freeport to be committed to get to 30%. It took the land trust almost 50 years to get to what we have for the 1,800, but a few big parcels can make a difference. You know, different things happening can really make a difference. So that is a good discussion to be had, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for organizing some of that data, Carrie.
Yep.
I have one comment following up on what Mason was talking about having volunteer groups being important to help us meet these objectives, particularly the non-measurable ones. I think that FCT is a perfect example of what is important for them to continue to do to help us make this goal work.
I agree.
Yeah.
Agreed. Any other comments on this focus area?
Hello, my name is Jenny Davidson. I'm a Freeport resident. I'd like to thank the board for doing an amazing job getting all of these sections together about climate change in Freeport. And then also, Carrie, thank you for just organizing that data, because those were my first two questions, was really, that Freeport's natural and the rural environment is why many of us live here, or why we love to live here. In addition to being beautiful, these natural areas provide benefits to mitigate climate change, such as sequestering carbon, cooling in the summer through shade and evapotranspiration, preserving moisture, reducing runoff, and flooding. So it's great that Freeport is maybe halfway to its goal, but I do have the same comment in that when it says a goal is conserving at least 30% of community land, I think conserving does need to be specified, what that means, that it really truly is set aside. And is it set aside, how is it set aside? Conserving as what? As open space, as farmland, something other than maybe just a public parking lot. And then 30% of community land, I also have a question about that. What is meant by community land? Is that we're conserving land that already belongs to the public, or is that any land within Freeport that could become preserved for the whole community? And I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to the intention. So following the state's goal of that kind of 30 by 30 and how other towns are doing it, it is total land available. So it doesn't have to be municipally owned yet, but just total land resources conserved, 30%.
Okay. So how much now, I mean, when we look out, how much of the land that we see that is either forest or ag or open space, shoreland, marsh, how much of that is public versus private? In other words, where, we can talk about, I love talking about preserving these large sections of land and that are contiguous with one another and have a preservation of the ecosystem services. But so much of this land also that's open space now seems to be within our backyards or on our farm or something to that effect. And my concern rests with zoning for that land. And I don't know if you could speak to that. It's given a time frame of medium, yet there was just a zoning, I think, passed that had to do with allowing more houses on a given property instead of just single family. You put more homes there. Also, auxiliary dwelling units did not count toward density. That seemed like it was actually a very critical and short-term kind of an action that was being taken. And how does that fit with the vision and the work of Freeport's climate action plan?
I can speak a little bit to that. So I think the intersection of conservation and development, in my mind and kind of in the spirit of this plan, and open to board members' thoughts on this, but thinking about really finding the benefits and the kind of co-benefits of both. So, understanding that, we're in a housing crisis, but we also want to preserve and conserve and restore the habitats around us on private land, on public land. And so I think that one of the actions, the first action in 7.1 is to update the Freeport open space plan. So in the climate action plan, we're not trying to necessarily hammer out all the details for what the zoning might look like to support conservation, or what specific mechanisms we can use, but just highlighting that is a whole process, unto itself. And those are conversations that really should be had. The plan is from 1999. So, I think people are probably ready to have this conversation and hammer out the details. So, in the climate action plan, the focus is on spotlighting the need to have those conversations and kind of put emphasis on conservation balanced with growth and housing and all the new kind of zoning that's gone through recently. I don't know if that answers your question or if you have more thoughts.
Okay, yeah. Clarifying the zoning plans would be for subdivision and for density would be really helpful, because right now I don't think anyone can figure it out except for perhaps the codes officer. It's not transparent to all of us. And I know there are other areas where you can say, okay, this is zoned, a minimum 1 acre for single family, or it's zoned 5 acre for single family, or it's zoned 40 acre ag. You know what you're dealing with. But here, I don't think you can read through the zoning code and understand it. And that allows it to be open to exploitation in certain ways. And there are loopholes in that as well. And then I'm also wondering, with respect to the ADUs, a lot of people have those because they need income, they may be on fixed incomes, they need those in order to stay in that land and to pay their taxes. And I'm wondering if there's a possibility of being the taxes being looked at as well, and how if perhaps you gave some of your land over to open space, you might have a reduced tax bill. So, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would also just remind everyone in this room that the town is embarking on a comprehensive planning process. So if you have, specific thoughts on land use policy or want to engage in that process, there'll be a lot of opportunities to have these really specific, fascinating, and important discussions in the next year or so, or less. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And I also wanted to add the downtown visioning plan, which the town is also working through and implementing, has a really, really important emphasis on high-density housing within the village, the Freeport Village. So there are these 3 plans that are working simultaneously with each other: the downtown visioning, the climate action plan, and the comprehensive plan. And they will all be headed in the same directions, and there'll be some overlaps, but there'll be many opportunities to talk specifically about zoning, ordinance, high-density dwellings, and all of that within those 3 different but parallel processes.
Hi, Eric Sofin again. I wanted to ask about the tree protection ordinance and I guess what is the intention meant by that in this context?
Sure. So that is something that's actually being worked on right now by the Tree Task Force, which is a task force of this advisory board So there's a couple of folks working on drafting ordinance language right now, so we kind of classified that as a quick win, something that maybe we could get that done in a year because it's already underway. A lot of work has gone into that already. I kind of came on in the middle of that, so I haven't really, honestly, even had the time to buff up on the specifics. I don't know if anyone on the board can speak a little bit to the intention or scope of that work.
Yeah. So basically, the intent of that proposed ordinance, and it may end up being a policy, a town policy, maybe an ordinance, we're not exactly sure yet. But it focuses primarily on municipal work, on municipal land, street trees, street shrubs, greenery around roads, all of that. Also protecting municipal land and replacing trees that are existing that are now falling, just a maintenance plan for existing trees. And then there is also the hope that we could look into private development, same parking lots, and then have a ratio of how many trees you plant, depending on how many parking spaces you build, that kind of thing. But it's all in process now, so nothing has been approved or presented to the council yet. But those are all ideas that we and the task force, the tree task force, are considering. But if you have any
Yeah, so
ideas
what I
or
was
feedback
going
for that, we're
suggest
happy to take
was,
that.
What a number of tree bylaws I know of in Massachusetts have, where if you want to remove a tree, there is some fee associated with that. It depends on the size of the tree. That goes into a tree fund that then funds other planting. Is that part of the thinking for this?
Yes, Portland has that in their tree ordinance, and the work of the tree task force is very much modeled on the Portland ordinance, and the arborist from Portland who has retired has been advising that group.
Great.
So I think that is one of the things that is pretty much included, but if you have other ideas, please.
I think outreach when a tree ordinance is passed is important, and then enforcement is a challenge.
Yes. Thank you.
Jim Hughes again. On trees, I was surprised to find out from Public Works that they don't maintain the trees on town property that are not alongside the road. All they do is maintain the roadways. Any of the property they have, and has several sections all over town, there is no maintenance done on the trees in those areas. As I know, I have one there's some town property behind my property, and there's several fallen trees, a couple of them in a big pile, just waiting to catch fire. So I approached the town on, take care of your lot. And I was turned down. No, they don't do that. So I think that might be something you want to put in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Kinney again, just real quick. On 711, I want you to know that the Freeport Open Space and Public Access Plan, we may be the only entity, but we still use that, the Freeport Conservation Trust. We refer to it in our, when we permanently conserve a property, in our baselines and our management plans. And so this document is of particular interest to us, and I think is a really important document to update. I've had a couple of people say, there isn't a newer version of this, and I'm like, nope, this is what we've got. So we use it for legal documents, and we use it. So updating that would be one of our top priorities. I would also say under 713, that second bullet, I would say support conservation to protect marshes, forest land, and other priority areas. Easements are not the only tool in the toolbox, so not narrowing it down just to easements, I think, is really important. There are other tools. You don't show, I just want to let you know, on page 33, which is the pretty picture page, I would love to change the leading by example. The example that's on there is a property in Yarmouth and not in Freeport. Could we change that? And I can help you do that. That would be great. And then there's also some other funding opportunities that I think that could be included in there. Land for Maine Future, there are all sorts of conservation tools that are available that should probably be listed in that section. I just noticed that today, so thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Hi, Laura again. 712, I didn't know if you were aware of a new law, LD 649, that was passed last July in Maine. I brought this up so I could read it. It's an act to promote water conservation and water quality and create habitat for wildlife, including pollinator species, by protecting low-impact landscaping. So you might include that in the bullet that talks about prioritizing native species, blah, 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 that there is a law backing that up. So,
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Sorry, Laura, could you repeat the name of that?
it's LD 649.
649, thank you.
Great. Any other comments on this focus area? Otherwise, we'd move ahead to final one. 5 out of 5. So the last focus area is public health and community resilience. And this focus area is encompassing, both infrastructure and services that support a healthy and safe community that is prepared for intensifying climate impacts like flooding, sea level rise, intense storms, and extreme heat. And so I think there's some kind of exciting actions in here and some other, actions that are just focused on making sure that the town systems and planning are up to date with climate projections, and making sure that climate change considerations are incorporated in kind of emergency management protocols and things like that. But any thoughts on this section? This focus area?
Eric Sofin again. I guess this is sort of section 9.2, infrastructure resilience to sea level rise and flooding. We've just seen with the recent storms a massive amount of coastal damage with storm surge flooding coinciding with a high tide, and got 2 historic high water marks in the span of a week. Is there, one thing that concerns me after that happened is seeing the rush to rebuild and people rebuilding in the same place when it's just going to flood again. Is there anything that can be done in, I think it would be sort of 9.2.2, 9.2.3 to address, moving to higher ground, and I'm sympathetic to the business needs of coastal working waterfront, but there needs to be some adaptation going on there. Thanks.
Thank you. And just to note, as you're reading through, you'll see that the Goal 8 and Goal 9 are the same language, and that is my mistake. So, yeah. Any other comments on this focus area or previous focus areas? Other comments, ideas, questions for the board? Does anyone from the board want to say anything? This is our last kind of slide here.
So I just want to thank everyone who has come out to give us feedback tonight, and there will be a couple more opportunities at our 2 meetings, subsequent meetings from this one. We also have a section in our website where you can fill out and provide comments. Is that correct, Nettie? Can you give the address?
We will. We're going to publicize the documents here very shortly, and that will be at the project website, which is freeportclimateaction.org. And so it'll all be laid out for online commenting, and we'll also provide in-person opportunities if you want to, take a copy home or come in and write paper copy feedback and things like that. And as Valerie mentioned, at upcoming FSAB meetings as well, as we head into the final stretch of creating this draft.
Yeah. So we will be continuing to gather feedback, and then by April, we will have a final draft to present to the council. And then the council will likely have another public meeting to gather feedback from all the residents about the final draft that we propose. So this is not the last opportunity to speak, so mark your calendars for any of those. And I also wanted to let everyone know that this Thursday we're co-sponsoring with Climate Work, which is a nonprofit organization, roundtable discussion for businesses to see how they can get involved into implementing sustainable practices to their business model. So if anyone wants to attend that is at 12:30 in the middle of the day at the community library in the community room, the 15th.
Jim Hughes again. I don't have a comment, I have a question. The Freeport Vulnerability Assessment, that booklet, that's what I thought the discussion was going to be about tonight. But I got here and it's the implementation table. How are these 2 articles, or how are they related? I'm not quite following.
Yeah, so the vulnerability assessment was created by the Greater Portland Council of Governments, who is our consultant doing this work. And so that's a technical document that is the foundation of the climate action plan. So we had that information. We had the greenhouse gas inventory report and our transportation analysis. And those 3 steps kind of helped us get an understanding of where the high impact action areas are. So like transportation is our highest emitting sector. The vulnerability assessment gave us an understanding that, sea level rise, intense storms, and access to key places during storms and extreme heat are kind of the 3 most important priorities for adaptation. That makes sense.
This was written by a consultant?
Correct. Yeah, prepared by GP
Freeport
Cog.
Okay.
Yes.
There's several chapters in here that I totally disagreed with, but I don't see them on the implementation plan. So the implementation plan looks pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's all we had for you all tonight. Thank you so much for coming to the board meeting. We're happy to have set this up in a way where everyone could hear, I hope. That's great. And thank you all so much for your comments. So board will go back and deliberate, and we'll get a refined draft plan out there after public comment period. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mason.
Nice job, Vinny.